Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we inspire fathers to build a blueprint for the next generation. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan. And today we are going to be inspired by talking about the topic of determination. Something that's kind of deep. You know, a lot of times we've talked about a lot of principles. We've talked about respect and discipline and endurance and a lot of different things. But I think determination is an interesting one because I think it's kind of a accumulation of a lot of different traits. So we're going to get through it. I've got a couple stories, some stories of determination that I like that have inspired me. I'm sure we're going to kind of go through some quotes and figure out how we can be more determined in our day-to-day life and our own personal creed. So let's get into it.
Excellent. Let's do it.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day.
You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it.
No retreat, no surrender.
You can't conceive of what I'm capable of.
There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow.
What we do in life, that goes in eternity.
So, determination. I was thinking about this, and this is such an action verb. I feel like a lot of the virtues that we talk about are kind of just like are not so action oriented. Like last time we talked about gentleness. That's you can be gentle in your everyday life, But determination, I mean, it's like that's a very proactive. It's very active, and so I like this in regards to adding it to your creed because it says a lot about the type of person that you are and the type of person that you want to be. Having this as part of your mantra or your personal belief set or your creed, I think that oftentimes as adults, specifically, we do not get opportunities, or we do not create opportunities, more like, to be determined on things. Now, I think that, like the definition of determined, what would you have for a definition of determined, Ethan?
Yeah, so I had the determination is a firm resolve to achieve a goal or overcoming an obstacle, regardless of whatever difficulties or setbacks there might be. Kind of a little bit deeper into that it's a persistent drive to strive towards a specific desired outcome. I guess it's this is kind of where it gets into fueled by inner strength, focus, resolve, discipline, patience, resilience. It's kind of all these things built together that really allows a person to push through adversity and challenges to complete the objectives that they have.
Yeah, I had something similar. Just like that firmness of purpose and resoluteness in achieving your goals. Now, I think that, and in some ways, it's kind of a cautionary. There needs to be some caution with determination, right? If you're determined to, like for example, Napoleon was determined to get to Moscow, right? And
he got there.
He got there, but at what cost? It cost him everything. And so
about 580,000 guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Or however many it was.
Hundreds of thousands of men, nearly almost all of his men. And so there's this there's a sunk cost fallacy. We've talked about that before. You're 200 feet from the crest of Everest, but you can tell a storm's coming in, and you have no time. You're out of time to get off of that mountain, and you're like, well, I'm almost there, So I think the determination has with it several, asterisks and warnings that make sure what you're being determined on and what your firmness of purpose and your resoluteness. I think it's important to reaffirm every step along the way that is what you want to be doing, and you are going in the right direction. And if you're down the road, if you're 10 feet or just barely almost there, and you're like, whoa, if I take one step further, this will not be in my best interest, then it's still okay to bail out. It's like something that I think even our mom said that kind of, if you feel like, even if on your wedding day you feel like, I don't want to do this, then say no. Don't feel like you have to do anything. Don't feel pressured into doing anything. If you're one step away from, if you've gone on a journey of 1,000 miles and you're one step away, and you have everything in you telling you that that's the wrong step, then take a pause and gather yourself and maybe don't take that step. So that's, I think, that is a part of determination that has to be part of it, because if you're set in the wrong direction, then you could end up in the wrong place. So that was one of the trigger warnings, I guess, for determination, or asterisks on the end of that.
I think that's I think you have to be careful, be mindful with your determination what the consequences of achieving that goal might be.
Yeah.
Sometimes, probably a lot of times, it's good, but sometimes getting to the peak of Everest maybe is not the best timing.
Not if you die. Yeah, exactly.
Not if you die, it's not going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So you said I have a longer story.
Okay.
And I actually wanted to read it the way that it was written, because it was written really beautifully. But I know you had some stories first, so why don't you share a story first, and then I'll read through my story about determination, and then we can kind of talk some more about how to model that and determination for kids and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So as I was kind of thinking through over the past couple of days, just some inspirational stories to me, or maybe not even inspirational, but something that just stuck to my mind whenever I thought determination. I've got kind of 3 just shorter stories that we've actually shared a lot of these before on the podcast, and so I won't get into them, crazy a lot. But the first one was Hugh Glass, the story of Hugh Glass, a recent movie that came out. Well, not recent, several years ago, about it's called The Revenant.
Recent to me is anything after 2010.
Yeah, seriously. Hugh Glass, for those of you who don't know, was an American frontiersman. He was a fur trapper, and basically he had this story of survival and determination. It's almost like it's a legendary story. This was in 1823. He was out on a fur trapping expedition in South Dakota, and he was part of a group. He was kind of leading a group of men in this expedition, and he was mauled by a grizzly bear, and he was just brutally, broken bones and cuts and it was so bad that the men that he were with, they thought that there's no way that this guy can survive, so they basically just left him for dead, and they just kind of buried him in like a very shallow grave, and just because they were afraid that they were kind of being chased by Indians and stuff, and so they just left him. Oh, he's going to die anyway. And so he had shattered leg, deep lacerations, and no supplies when they left him, but he just refused to give up. He just would not die. And so he crawled. This is a true story, by the way. He crawled on his hands and knees over 200 miles with just sheer willpower, eating roots and berries and whatever he could find, and trying to stay alive. And eventually he reached a military base and was saved. But he was fueled. His determination basically was fueled by his rage against these men that just left him for dead, just abandoned him. So, not to spoil the story too much, there's a couple different endings to the story. So one ending is he goes and kills all these guys, and another ending is actually he forgave, I think, a couple of them, and then there was one guy that was like this main guy that he did track down. So his story, just being alone, without resources, in this bitter cold, freezing South Dakota winter, when normal humans would have just given up. There's people that don't want to go outside if it's 20 degrees, and just that sheer determination and willpower was inspirational, kind of a powerful lesson to us all, that when you put your mind to something, you can do it. I mean, even if that something is revenge, maybe that something is money, or maybe that something is getting into shape, or maybe that something is creating a good loving home for your children, or a good relationship with your wife, or whatever that determination might be, whatever the motivation behind the determination. Definitely something that we can all do.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. That's such a crazy. It's funny that a lot of these determination things, it's oftentimes a determination to survive or to recover. And that's sometimes where you see like the most crazy stories. One kind of cautionary tale, but also a plug for a show, is there's a show on Netflix called Wyatt Earp in the Cowboy War. And it's like a documentary style show, a dramatized show, and it tells the whole story about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and the Earp brothers, and how they got in a shootout at the OK Corral with Ike Clanton, and all the cowboys. So it's actually interesting. The story, the shootout, is kind of like the first part of the story. The story goes on and on and on and on and on.
Have you seen Tombstone before?
Yeah. So this it's really good. I mean, it's kind of the similar thing. It gives a historical background on all these guys, and what happened is after there was Wyatt, for those of you who don't know, Wyatt Earp and his two brothers, Virgil, and then I forget the other one's name, the younger one, and then Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday was just a drunk that one time saved Wyatt Earp's life when he was about to get shot in the back. But he was a drunk and he had tuberculosis, and so he was a dentist, and his doctor told him that because he had tuberculosis, he needed to move west. He lived in Georgia. He needed to move west for some fresh air, and the doctor told him to drink whiskey, and so he was just a drunk out west. He lived in Arizona, and the whole thing is that there was this feud that kind of started up between these cowboys, which for the most part were kind of ex-Confederates for the most part, and Wyatt Earp, who was kind of like a ranger for the town. And it's interesting how this progresses, because there's kind of this feud that starts, and then this main guy in the Cowboys, he kind of sets up this whole thing, and he's like, after a bunch of his buddies get shot at the OK Corral in the shootout, he sets up this thing, and he's like, oh, my buddies were shot down in cold blood, and my brother was killed by Wyatt Earp, and actually Wyatt and his brothers got put in jail for a short time, and they had this trial and stuff, and then eventually this feud just got out of back and forth, and both of Wyatt's brothers got shot. One of them got killed, and one of them was permanently injured for life. And then Wyatt went on his what they call his vendetta ride, where he went around and just killed as many cowboys as he could. They were part of this cowboy gang, which the way that it was kind of being billed in the newspapers and stuff was that these were Confederates who were trying to live, and they're kind of these vigilantes, and the North, the Earps were from the North, these Yankees were trying to stomp out the Confederates, and so it kind of was continuing to divide the country a little bit. And Wyatt, he was so determined to get this revenge that he actually became kind of a bad guy. He went outside the law, and he was out just killing people. And so it kind of later in his
Not to
life,
say these people didn't need killing, but
still
outside of the
he
law.
was outside of his jurisdiction. He was on a vendetta ride. That's what the newspaper called it. And he was just killing all these guys, and he wouldn't bring anybody in. He would just kill them. And he eventually later in his life, everybody called him. He moved to L.A. He ended up moving to L.A. And he worked as kind of an advisor for some old Hollywood movies. And they people didn't really like him that much because they called him a murderer. You're a murderer because you would kill all these guys and you didn't bring him in and stuff. And so I think in some ways his determination was a little bit to his detriment because he just got so obsessed with vengeance that it really, he kind of went a little bit off the deep end. But you made me think of that. Also a great show, and I recommend watching it.
Nice.
So that one's good. So I do have a kind of a story here, and it was written. I found it on a website called impactyourworld.ng.org, and it was written by Bert Dubin, and it talks about determination. And I was thinking about taking snippets. Usually what we do is when we find cool stories and stuff, we'll take snippets and we'll just kind of paraphrase stuff, or we'll do other research and just add it in. But the way that this was written was really cool, and it kind of painted a really cool picture of this guy's struggles and what he went through and how determined he was. So I'm just going to read it straight up, like I'm reading to a bedtime story. So here goes. The little country schoolhouse was heated by an old-fashioned, pot-bellied coal stove. An 8-year-old boy named Glenn Cunningham had the job of coming to school early each day so that he could use kerosene to start the fire and warm the room before his teacher and his classmates arrived. One morning, someone mistakenly filled the kerosene container he used with gasoline, and disaster struck. It's not a good thing. Very different.
Combustibility.
Yeah. The class and the teacher arrived to find the schoolhouse engulfed in flames. Terrified on realizing that Glenn was inside, they rushed in and managed to drag the unconscious little boy out of the flaming building, more dead than alive. He had major burns over the lower half of his body and was taken to a nearby county hospital. From his bed, the dreadfully burned, semi-conscious little boy faintly heard the doctor saying to his mother. The doctor told his mother that her son would surely die, which was for the best, really, for the terrible fire had devastated the lower half of his body. Oh, man, brutal. But the brave boy didn't want to die. Glenn made up his mind that he would survive, and somehow, to the amazement of the physician, he did survive. Yet when the mortal danger was past, he again heard the doctor and his mother speak quietly. The mother was told that since the fire had destroyed so much flesh in the lower part of his body, it would almost be better if he had died, since he was doomed to be a lifetime cripple with no use at all of his lower limbs. His mother refused to let the doctors amputate. So these doctors are top-notch. Once more, this brave little boy made up his mind he would not be crippled, he would walk. But unfortunately, from the waist down, Glenn had no motor ability. His thin and scarred legs just dangled there, all but lifeless. Ultimately, Glenn was released from the hospital every day after work. Afterward, his mother and father would massage his little legs, but there was no feeling, no control, nothing. Yet his determination that he would walk was as strong as ever. When he wasn't in bed, he was confined to a wheelchair. One sunny day, his mother wheeled him out into the yard to get some fresh air. This day, instead of sitting there, he threw himself from the chair. Glenn pulled himself across the grass, dragging his legs behind him. He worked his way to the white picket fence, bordering their lot. With great effort, he raised himself up on the fence. Then, stake by stake, he began dragging himself along the fence, resolved that he would walk. He started to do this every day until he wore a smooth path around the yard beside the fence. There was nothing he wanted more than to develop life in those legs. Ultimately, through his daily massages, Glenn's iron persistence, and his resolute determination, he did develop the ability to stand up, then to walk, haltingly with help, then to walk by himself, and then miraculously to run. Glenn began to run to school. He ran for the sheer joy of running and being able to run. He ran everywhere that he could. The people in the town would often see him run by on his way to who knows where and smile. Later in college, Glenn made the track team where his tremendous determination paid off. He eventually received the nickname Kansas Flyer. In February 1934, in New York City's famed Madison Square Garden, this young man was not expected to survive, who would surely never walk, who could never hope to run. This determined young man, Dr. Glenn Cunningham, ran the mile in 4 minutes and 8 seconds, the world's fastest indoor mile. Later that same year, in a prestigious outdoor track meet, he shaved another second off his record to run the world's fastest mile to that time. And so it says at the end here, you can always achieve success if you only believe in yourself. So obviously we know folks can run faster than a 4-minute mile now, but 4 minutes and 7 seconds or 8
in
seconds,
the 30s.
and then later 7 seconds was the fastest at the time. And so I thought it was such a cool story of someone really coming back and having the determination to drive forward even when everyone tells you, heck, you should be dead, or you're going to be a cripple for the rest of your life, or all these things. And what he was able to do was just incredible. So I thought that was a really cool story.
Yeah, I like that. That is a great story, and actually kind of goes into one of the things that I was thinking about. And I heard this, I think I heard this on like a Jocko Willink podcast or something like that. But he's talking about motivation and discipline, and kind of, let's say, willpower and motivation. They're talking about, how do you get, somebody asked a question like, how do you get motivated, or what's, how do I be more motivated to go work out and stuff like that? And basically he said, motivation is for fools, right? Motivation is for weak-minded people. So what you need is discipline. And I think that kind of goes into determination, right? And so it's better to be disciplined over motivated, because discipline creates consistent action, and motivation is often like a temporary or unreliable type thing. Oh, I'm not motivated today, so I don't think I'm going to go to the gym. Right? But if you're disciplined, and if you learn to become disciplined, then it doesn't matter whether you're motivated or not. You've created a habit, and you do that thing. And so, motivation tends to be more emotion circumstance based, versus discipline, on the other hand, is more just kind of commitment and built on habits. It ensures that you'll kind of stay that course. And so when I was thinking about determination in that story you told, right, I'm sure he was motivated, right? But he was probably very disciplined in, getting outside and walking the fence and doing everything else, and just consistently getting better and better and better at running, having that habit that he formed, or that discipline around exercise and getting better. I think that will help make being determined a little bit easier if you have kind of that discipline built around, your determination. And so I had looked up and it said, well, how do I personally become more determined in my own life? How do I see a goal and just decide and make it apparent that, hey, I'm going to do whatever it takes to reach that goal. So first one was, setting clear goals. I think that's important, right? If you just say, "Oh, I want to be rich," it's like, yeah, well, what does rich mean? Rich can mean a lot of different things. So maybe setting a specific goal, something that you can actually aim at, is important. Breaking goals into manageable steps will, make it easier to be determined through the process. Determining your why, or developing a strong why, is kind of important. Why am I doing this? What's the reasoning behind why I want to achieve this goal? Next one, we just talked about building good habits and discipline to support the plan of achieving that goal. Practicing resilience, and even when things get tough, or if you didn't and doing it just because you're disciplined.
Oh, you cut out a little bit.
Next would be
you're saying practicing resilience. What did you say about that one?
Yeah, so just being resilient, and even if you don't want to do something, when you wake up in the morning and you're a little achy or maybe you're tired, still doing it, just going out and doing it. Surrounding yourself with support, people that support you in your path, visualizing success, and then celebrating your progress. Those are all things that kind of can help someone on the path of being determined, or to be more determined to achieve different things in your life. It always reminds me of the quote that says that, he that says he can and he that says he can't or cannot are both right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of, it's a mental thing to be able to create a plan that will allow you to stay consistent and determined through the process. So that was just kind of a couple things from determination that I thought was really interesting.
I think that those are some great things, and I think an overarching thing there is that you got to pick something to be determined about. I think that there's two things. One is that we always talk about modeling these things as fathers, specifically for us, or our parents. How are you modeling determination for your kids? What are you determined to do? What are you setting your sights on? I know that, Ethan, you've done some things like, for example, you have done 2 triathlons, and you've you coach soccer for your kids, and you've got other things on the horizon that you're working on. And right now, I'm kind of determined to. I'm training and getting ready for a jiu-jitsu competition in October. It's kind of another level of it's like a higher level of competition, where it's like much more serious than just like a local thing, and so it's I'm looking forward to doing that. And I've been running every morning and trying to get ready for that. And the kids see me come in. I wake up at 5:30 and go for a 2-mile run around the neighborhood, kind of as fast as I can, because the whole thing is I want to be conditioned cardio wise, to be able to just go during a match, and come in all sweaty, and the kids are like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "Well, I'm training," and even some of the other boys are like, "I want to do a competition soon," and I'm like, "Well, let's see when they can be." And so I think that that leads into the second thing, is that as you demonstrate your determination and what it takes to whatever you're doing, whether that's whether that's doing a competition, or whether that's running a marathon, or running a 5K, or running a triathlon, or doing a chess competition, or whatever it is that you do, or building a business. Some people build like a business, and they're like, "I'm determined to do this, son." And like, we got and share those successes and share that work with your kids. Like, "Hey, son, I got a big client today, and this is going to mean a lot for our family." And they'll let them see that. And then for your kids, there's lots more opportunities, I think, for kids to achieve and to be determined about things, whether that's a musical instrument, or whether that's a sport. Most kids are in at least one sport. And there's other things like, say, like a chess competition, or a Rubik's Cube competition is something that my sons express interest in, or the debate team, or whatever. There's a wide variety of things that of interests where you can pursue excellence. And so modeling that and then creating opportunities to where your kids can do that and say, oh, hey, there's this thing coming up, and would you like to get ready? I can help you get ready for this competition or this showcase that you're going to do, or whatever it may be. It's just that as sometimes kids don't know how or where to do those things, so it's our responsibility as parents to help provide those opportunities, so that when they look back, they can say, yeah, I remember working really hard and being able to do this and that because of the determination that I had. I see that a lot with scouting. When I look back at my life, a lot of the hard things that I did and achieved in scouting was, I felt like, a determination. You had to be determined to do it, and so that was, when I was young, that was one thing that I really looked at.
Yeah, I liked what you said from a kid's perspective of like celebrating the wins. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times too, the journey can be celebrated too, right? Like maybe you go to this competition or previous competitions, and maybe you haven't won every single match that you've been in, but still like the journey and the training and everything that has led up to that is like huge. And I think that's really important for your kids to see, or for our kids to see us determined towards a specific goal. Like, oh, dad sees something that he wants and he's pushing hard. He's working hard to achieve that specific goal. I think that's very, very important for us as parents to show our kids.
Yeah. Well, I know you shared one of your quotes. Do you have a different quote?
Yeah, so the second one I had, actually it's kind of a story and then ending with a quote. So it is the story of Louis Zamperini. Do you remember that name? That is the guy from Unbroken.
Oh yeah, he's the guy that was in the
Japanese POW camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was an Olympic runner, and then after that he was in World War II, he was a bombardier, and his plane was shot down over the ocean as he was on a bombing run. And this is in 1943. He was shot down over the Pacific Ocean, and him and two other crew members that survived the crash, they drifted on a raft in the Pacific Ocean for 47 days. They drifted on a raft. So they were endured hunger, dehydration. They were attacked several times by sharks. Eventually, they were captured by the Japanese after being, drifting at sea for over a month and a half.
What's worse?
Now they get captured by the Japanese and get sent to, some of the worst POW camps in Japan at the time, where he now served in very constant physical and psychological torturous situations. For 2 years, he was in POW camps in Japan. And so, despite all of that suffering, his determination never wavered from what he was doing. His brother, actually, his older brother, was his trainer for his Olympic career. He was a runner. And in the movie, there's a movie Unbroken, and in the movie, the quote that his brother always told him was, "If you can take it, you can make it." Right? Basically, if you tough it out, if you hold on, right, you can get to the end. And I kind of looked into that quote, and I don't know if they changed it for the movie, but the quote that I read that his brother said usually more than that was, "A moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory." And so that was just something I thought was kind of really interesting, that, all of this craziness that this guy went through in his life is his perseverance and determination in the face of such adversity was kind of inspiring to me. And I remember there's this one story of him specifically when he was in a POW camp, and he had I read the book as well that he wrote, which was really interesting. But he part of the torture in one of these camps was they had to hold this like big log above their head, and if they dropped the log, then they would the guards would beat them with these sticks. And so part of his punishment was, for doing something. And I guess one of the main guards just kind of had it out for him to hold this log, this really heavy log over his head. And these guys are like, like next to nothing, almost like, concentration camp skinny and barely surviving and starving and worked half to death, 3/4 to death.
Yeah.
And so, the story was that the guard said if he drops that log, shoot him. And so he held the log for like an impressive amount of time, I guess longer than, anyone should have been able to hold it. He kind of, just locked his arms out and just through sheer determination kind of just fought back against the situation that he was in.
Mm-hmm.
So a moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. So sometimes it's hard to continue to stay disciplined and determined, and to maintain that determination over a long period of time. But I, from experience, right, in different things that I have done, it's worth it. It's worth it for sure to stick with things. It's important to know when to maybe pivot, right, and maybe change. But just because you pivot, that's not a failure. That's just a redeployment of your determination resources into something different. So
Yeah. No, that's a great story. I think that sometimes when people get their backs against the wall, they really can show their colors, and it's amazing. There's a show that Shannon and I recently watched. It's called Terror, and it's on Netflix, and it's about the HMS Terror and HMS Ibris, which were two Arctic exploration ships in the mid-1800s, which were trying to find the Northwest Passage, or a northern passage, like over Canada, or an Arctic passage to the other side to the Pacific. So they're trying to do that, and then they got stuck in the ice. And it's called Franklin's Lost Expedition. Sir John Franklin's Lost Expedition. And the show, it's kind of based on historic facts.
Is that the one where like a monster thing comes and starts like attacking the guys? I've seen that.
It's like a kind of like a skinwalker type thing, but it's made to be like a scary movie. But it's really heartwarming, and it's just kind of obviously they don't know what happened to those guys except for that they all died. But it's very interesting to kind of just see what that might have looked like. And there's a little bit of a scary theme of it where there's like one of the Eskimos that, is like a kind of like a wise, how would you call it? Like a
elder or something.
Magic elder man or whatever like that. And they accidentally shoot him thinking he's a polar bear, but he actually turns into like this like Wendigo, like polar bear human type thing that like hunts him down. And it's pretty cool. But just researching the Lost Expedition and how those guys stayed out there for so long. I mean, they're out there for years, and they're just trying to survive, and it's kind of a cool thing to see about what they might have gone through, what that might have looked like, especially from like a starvation and like politics and the dynamics of a survival situation where everybody's just trying to survive, and how quickly does the hierarchy of the Royal Navy crumble, So it was a good show, but based off of a true story. But yeah, I think that that determination is so cool. You said you had a quote with that. Was that the one that he shared?
Yeah. A moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory.
Yeah. So my quote was from our boy Zig Ziglar, classic. And he said, I believe success is achieved by ordinary people with extraordinary determination. And so it kind of reminds me of, didn't Gandalf say something very similar to that? I think he said something
about talking about hobbits or something.
He said that, like, the most extraordinary things done in this life aren't by some brave heroes, but by ordinary people. What was it?
Yeah.
Something like that. Let me see if I can find it. I'm sure I don't want to butcher it, but it's really good. I found it is the small everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. Well, that's not exactly determination, but still pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot more ordinary people in this life than there are extraordinary people. And yeah, I think the difference, what do they say, the difference between try and triumph is just a little bit of oomph.
I love it.
So cool. All right. Well, hopefully this has been some inspirational, some motivational kind of stories and talk about determination and how you can apply it, how we can apply it to our own personal creeds to impact those around us. You know, particularly, you know, in our case, our kids and our wives, our lives, you know, those around us. And I think a lot of things that Jared and I do individually are kind of an inspiration to each other. And, you know, find your determination. If you feel lacking in this specific area, then do a little research on it. You know, listen to this episode 10 or 15 or 20 times. You know, have your kids see you in the journey, along the journey of achieving your goals, and having that determination and that mindset. I think that'll be very important. So we encourage you to do that. We're definitely going to do that, and we would love to have you, you know, join us on our journey, and let's build that creed together.
Let's do it. Thanks.